fortuitous occasion, I stumbled upon the nocturnal bus for the very first time. The tales undoubtedly had reached my ears before, as they had reached all of us. The domain of urban legends held substantial prominence in the sphere of my residence. One cannot dismiss the notion that this prominence is likely attributed to the fact that my origins trace back to an utterly unremarkable and frankly insipid provincial town, possessing meager attractions. The youth in this vicinity are not blessed with a multitude of engagements, thus their faculties of imagination tend to break free from constraints, and the pursuit of alternate realities becomes the dominant fad. During our formative years, my companions and I were ensnared by urban legends, voraciously consuming the narratives exchanged in the schoolyards, subsequently proliferated by faceless contributors on virtual discussion boards. These sagas held the dual capacity of instilling terror and exhilaration, thus infusing a sense of enthusiasm into our otherwise drab existences. In retrospection, it's evident that my naivete knew no bounds in those days. Admittedly, a faction of my comrades adopted a more skeptical stance, yet I, without reservations, wholeheartedly embraced each narrative. The disappearing traveler of Spencer Avenue, the troll entity of the southern quadrant, and the ghostly woman of Croft Estate stood as a select few among my preferences. My companions and I donned the mantles of amateur detectives, meticulously scrutinizing every locale, laboring to exhume even a morsel of substantiation for these mythical creatures and supernatural apparitions. Regrettably, our endeavors bore no fruit, no phantoms or specters, no monstrous entities, and not a trace of anomalies. Eventually, I too adopted a cynic's disposition, deducing that these fables were naught but juvenile absurdities, and my pursuit of them was a futile exercise. The ultimate bus constituted yet another fragment of the indigenous lore that had been woven into the fabric of our upbringing, an emblem of falsehood akin to its counterparts. Alas, I stand corrected today. According to established records, the final bus departing from the city nucleus embarks at 15 minutes to midnight, embarking from the main bus terminus situated on High Street. This, ostensibly, is the conveyance sensible folk opt for if they seek a secure journey homeward following a night of revelry in the urban expanse. The drinking establishments and nightclubs seal their entrances at 1 a.m., giving rise to throngs of inebriated celebrants spilling onto the thoroughfares, embroiled in skirmishes over taxicabs, forming queues before establishments purveying late-night meat skewers, endeavoring to forge 11th-hour liaisons, or beseeching acquaintances in pursuit of nocturnal soirees. It's a scene replicated with precision every Friday and Saturday night. Predictably, a handful of altercations materialize, accompanied by a contingent of individuals who, in their inebriation, meet the ground with an unfortunate intimacy. The entire sequence is profoundly and predictably disheartening. Law enforcement is summoned, as are the paramedics, and with time the throngs disband, surrendering the domain to an eerie stillness that reclaims the dimly lit avenues. Thus commences the hours of twilight, when the judicious and law-abiding populace find themselves nestled securely in their beds. Post-curfew, the streets become a terrain for the vulnerable, the homeless souls bereft of refuge, compelled to seek solace in storefront alcoves, swathing their shivering forms in tattered blankets, praying for the endurance to endure the forthcoming night. And there emerge the predators, the ones your mother cautioned you about, the bands of ruffians who roam the avenues, their passions inflamed as they hunt for a target to ruthlessly assail, and the predatory men who skulk in the darkness, observing susceptible women whom they can victimize. On a Monday dawn, you'll peruse the narratives in the local gazettes: the destitute man battered to a pulp, the young girl subjected to sexual aggression in a rear alley. The police will inaugurate inquiries and make pleas for eyewitnesses. On occasion, they will apprehend the culprits, while other times they will not. You'll extend compassion toward the sufferers, yet covertly experience a sense of relief that it did not transpire to you or an acquaintance. However, in these instances, the wrongdoers are human monstrosities, constructed of flesh and sinew, not the supernatural malevolence I endeavored to pursue. Amid my skeptical years, I subscribed to the notion that these human predators constituted the most dreadful entities, claiming dominion over the twilight moments preceding dawn. Yet I was erroneous, and now I am privy to the verity. there exist entities far more sinister that skulk within the obscurity. The initial occurrence I encountered the nocturnal bus transpired during a trying period in my life. I had just commemorated my 21st year and severed ties with my companion of 2 years. In retrospect, I now apprehend how the dissolution was optimal for both of us, but during that juncture I was shattered and consumed by anger. My comrades had treated me to a nocturnal revelry in the aspiration of alleviating my spirits. A commendable endeavor, but regrettably, it did not yield the intended outcome. I imbibed inordinate amounts, commencing with beers and progressing to potent spirits. We patronized a club where I embarked on several mortifying and futile endeavors to form connections. As if that was not sufficiently deplorable, I subsequently engaged in a brawl with my dearest friend, throwing a blow in his direction before the bouncers expelled me from the venue. I, in my inebriated stupor, made the unwise decision to traverse the lanes unaccompanied. Strangely, I evaded suffering a physical assault or collapsing face first, thereby fracturing my cranium on the walkway. Instead, I somehow managed to totter to a bus shelter, oblivious in my intoxicated state that the official bus service had concluded for the night, with the next one scheduled for the morning. I recollect reclining on the bench, and I must have lost consciousness, as I awoke several hours later to find the avenues devoid of life. I was utterly alone, or so I believed. My heart nearly leapt from my chest when I espied the aged bus progressing along the thoroughfare in my direction, expelling dark fumes from its exhaust as it advanced, its cacophonous motor shattering the preceding stillness. The conveyance was partially illuminated by the street lamps, although I noted with some trepidation how the lights flickered as the bus traversed past them. The vehicle bore the semblance of a relic from the 1960s, the type of archaic metal container on wheels one might anticipate encountering at a vintage automobile exhibition. Diverging from the contemporary automobiles we are accustomed to, those that effortlessly glide through urban thoroughfares in hushed serenity, this antiquated, corroded hulk clattered ceaselessly, exuding a cacophony that implied imminent mechanical collapse. Yet it pressed on, persistently advancing along the deserted road, steadily nearing my haven. My observations registered the absence of insignias or embellishments adorning the flank of the bus, and the front windshield remained unadorned by any indication of its destination. The vehicle's external facade bore a coat of ebony, with even the panes shaded, thereby obstructing any view of the interior occupants. A shiver of chill traversed my spine as I recollected the intricacies of the final bus lore, a narrative I had assimilated and scrutinized in my formative years. The sight unfolding before me correlated with the chronicles, the spectral bus materializing on forsaken streets in the wee hours, extending passage to the weary and destitute. A wave of near panic engulfed me, ascertaining whether I inhabited the realm of reverie or grappled with a paranoid hallucination. Much of my youth had been devoted to pursuing these myths, scouring for any semblance of proof substantiating entities beyond our own reality. Now, confronted with incontrovertible verity, a substantial facet of me aspired to flee expeditiously. Yet I desisted. Whether terror had rendered me immobile or my inquisitiveness had seized control, I stood my ground, awaiting the bus's arrival. With trembling legs, I rose as the carriage maneuvered adjacent to my shelter. Despite my considerable intake of spirits, an unexpected sobriety pervaded me. The interval for the vehicle to halt and the antiquated door to creak open materialized interminably. Upon its unveiling, I confronted an affable middle-aged gentleman, attired in a tidy azure uniform, presiding behind the wheel, steering his bus toward an undisclosed endpoint. A genial glint illuminated his gaze as he directed it downward at me, exuding an aura of warmth and hospitality. Subsequently, his lips parted, uttering words in a gentle, almost paternal timbre, articulating, "Good evening, my comrade. Would you care to embark?" Familiar with the enigmatic chauffeur through tales whispered, his presence and overall disposition nevertheless caught me unawares. Words eluded me, my reply manifesting as a stuttering cascade. "Where shall your path lead me?" I inquired, the tremor in my voice belying my apprehension. "Residence," came the response from the chauffeur, accompanied by a comforting grin. "I shall eventually accompany you to your abode. However, existence isn't merely focused on reaching the destination. It revolves around the expedition itself. Occasionally, a leap of faith becomes imperative. So, my youthful companion, what is your response? Shall you journey with us? I confess that I found myself apprehensive in that instance, indeed utterly terrified. In some way I comprehended the gravity of this juncture, how the verdict I arrived at in that very moment could forge the trajectory of my subsequent life. I remained oblivious to the exact nature of the prospects awaiting me should I embark on this voyage. Yet I held a substantial notion, and it was petrifying. Yet to abandon this endeavor would mean forever forfeiting the revelation of veracity. Thus, inhaling profoundly, summoning my valor, I embarked onto the carriage, witnessing the driver's grin as the portal sealed firmly behind me. Upon scrutinizing the bus conductor from close quarters, I intuited an unsettling aura about him and immediately commenced repenting my choice. But by then, it was a fait accompli. That marked the inaugural instance I embarked on the night bus. Over the course of years, I've engaged in this odyssey thrice in total, surviving to narrate my chronicle on each occurrence. Navigating this spectral bus isn't as straightforward as one might surmise. There exists no compendium of regulations to adhere to, no stipulated instant or locale. Whether this hinges on pure randomness or if the bus itself selects its sojourners, I remain uncertain. Nonetheless, I have managed to weave together recurring strands, drawing from both my personal escapades and those of fellow wayfarers. We convene on a digital forum to recount our anecdotes and share insights. It's a matter of safety as much as anything else. The night bus could prove fatal should one's vigilance falter. Having amassed this erudition over the preceding years, I am now prepared to impart it to you here. Upon embarking the bus, one's gaze shall be met with sequences of rigid, unyielding seats extending toward the back of the vehicle's interior. Initially, nothing seems unconventional about this arrangement. Passengers shall also meet one's gaze, although one should refrain from engaging with them at this juncture, avoiding any eye contact. Assuming a seat on the unoccupied bench toward the front of the bus is recommended, though the precise location is of minimal consequence. They shall approach you in due course. The sojourn itself could extend for hours, or at least that's the impression it imparts when one is on board. One can perceive the external vistas through the windows, casting a gaze upon the panorama, meager as it may be. Initially, the scene shall appear familiar, urban boulevards, structures, and establishments that elicit recognition. Yet swiftly, one discerns a disconcerting quality about the panorama. The streets shall be entirely deserted, bereft of any vehicular traffic or pedestrians in sight. Establishments shall remain shuttered, with no illumination emanating from any edifice along the thoroughfare. As you venture farther from the heart of the city, the scenes that unfold before you become increasingly surreal. In due course, the orderly pathways and meticulously maintained edifices yield to urban deterioration. Dilapidated edifices and remnants, reminiscent of a forgotten metropolis erased by the hands of time. Gradually, the bus will depart from the urban expanse and penetrate what presents itself as a dense woodland. The narrow path you will tread upon will be veiled in obscurity, solely illuminated by the radiant gleam of the vehicle's headlights. Should you cast a fleeting glance into the woods flanking either side of the road, intermittent glimpses of shadows traversing the tree line may catch your eye. Peculiar silhouettes and unidentified creatures with luminous crimson eyes piercing through the obscurant gloom. These unsettling beings will fleetingly grace your sight as the bus presses forward, vanishing as swiftly as they materialize. Initially, you might ascribe this to the whims of your imaginative mind, yet deep within, you'll acknowledge a sinister presence lurking within those woods. At this juncture of the expedition, the realization dawns that you've departed the realm of the living. I am uncertain about the bus's destination, but I am certain that sustained gazing out the windows is unwise. The enigmas that haunt those spaces can sow the seeds of madness. Furthermore, your focus should be riveted on those who share the bus with you, as they present the more imminent hazard. My compatriots in the realm of online investigation and I regard the passengers as forlorn souls. It is apparent that they have severed ties with the realm of the living. An essential fragment is amiss within them, a vital component gone astray. Once you engage with them, whether by your volition or not, the desolation within their vacant, lifeless gazes becomes evident. They yearn to fasten onto you because you possess what they crave: life. This underscores the gravity of adhering to the established regulations. You must not allow them to infiltrate your thoughts under any circumstances. Upon setting foot on the bus, you are likely to encounter 6 entities, each with their own distinctive attributes and stratagems, which they will endeavor to employ against you. Drawing from the collective experiences of our forum participants, I have constructed an account of each of these supernatural beings. Firstly, there is the conductor, whose physical depiction has been previously expounded upon. The conductor's primary objective is to secure your presence on board. To this end, he will assume an affable and inviting demeanor, enticing you to partake in a journey aboard his bus. However, once the portal closes behind you and the bus commences its motion, you might perceive a slight falter in the conductor's smile as his gaze shifts from you and fixes upon the road. Notwithstanding this, the conductor is a benign figure who assumes a modest yet pivotal role in the unfolding events. From this juncture onward, his sole responsibility is to steer the course, and he does honor his commitment to you. He will eventually return you home, provided you avoid enraging any of the spirits throughout the voyage. As I mentioned earlier, the journey might seem to stretch on for hours, but upon disembarking on your familiar street, back within our domain, scarcely any time will have elapsed at all. He releases you, his grin resurfacing as he utters, "Wish you a delightful evening. Anticipate crossing paths in the near future." And you'll find yourself stationed on the sidewalk adjacent to your abode, disoriented and lingering in a condition of stupefied incredulity. Your gaze traces the specter bus as it navigates down the avenue, only to inexplicably dissolve into nothingness at the terminus of your lane. Following the chauffeur, the primary traveler to capture your attention is the reveler, an alluring, youthful lady who seems to be situated in her initial to mid-20s. Her physical semblance undergoes transformation on every occasion. At times her hair takes on a shade of brown, while on other instances it adopts the hue of gold. Correspondingly, her skin tone vacillates between fair and dusky, contingent upon the observer. What persists is her aesthetic and attire. Adorned in an elegant dress and elevated footwear, clutching a designer purse. Her aroma is redolent with sweetness and allure, yet you might also detect a subtle trace of alcohol on her exhalations. You'll discern how her mascara has streamed down, indicative of recent weeping. Nonetheless, there's an element within her profound and expressive eyes that will exert a magnetic pull, an inner grace and susceptibility that tugs at your sentiments. It's noteworthy that you will be entranced by the young lady, regardless of your gender or your customary inclinations of desire. Fixating your gaze on her will prove unfeasible, and you'll feel impelled to secure a spot in close proximity to her. During the initial junctures of the voyage, the party girl will initiate conversation with you, diverting your focus from the eccentric scenes outside the bus's panes. In the beginning, her demeanor will exude flirtation and joviality, inquiring about your persona and expounding upon her nocturnal escapades. However, ere long, the dialogue will adopt a more somber hue as she discloses a distressing episode from her history, be it childhood maltreatment, a tumultuous former partner, or the passing of a cherished soul. The narrative will shift with each retelling, though the theme of sorrow and agony will persist. Your heart will empathetically resonate with her, irrespective of whether empathy is typically a trait you bear. Subsequent to recounting her woeful chronicle, the young lady will entreat you to accompany her to her abode, to provide her a modicum of solace. The allure will be formidable, but it is imperative that you abstain from acceding to her entreaty. Remember her true nature and her genuine intentions. I advise you to gracefully decline her proposal without subjecting her to undue distress. The reveler might be a spirit adrift, yet according to all indications she still experiences human sentiments. Her response to your refusal will not be one of ire, but rather she will stifledly sob into her palms. You'll experience a sense of remorse, but you must persevere and alter your seating arrangement, forsaking the forlorn maiden to her melancholy. The subsequent voyager you'll chance upon occupies a couple of rows behind the reveler. We refer to her as the elderly voyager, or the senior citizen. She is an aged woman, likely in her octogenarian years. Her hair is white curls, swathed in a wrap and a substantial winter overcoat, with a wheeled shopping cart stationed beneath her seat. Her countenance displays an intricate network of creases, and the fragrance she dons is rather overwhelming. Yet the senior citizen possesses benevolent eyes and a tender maternal grin. She'll evoke memories of an elderly relative, akin to a grandmother or esteemed great-aunt, and you'll develop an endearing sentiment toward her. An individual of her advanced years and aspect is the most improbable candidate to stumble upon aboard a nocturnal bus during the wee hours of dawn. And yet behold, another stray soul ensnared in an unending expedition. The elderly person will engage you in a genial and virtuous manner, inquiring about your life and lineage, while also regaling you with chronicles from her protracted and captivating journey. Undoubtedly, you'll experience comfort conversing with her, but it is paramount to not lose sight of her true identity. The dialogue will conclude with her requesting your company to assist with her provisions or a similar favor. She'll extend an invitation to concoct a meal for you, your favorite repast or snack, whatever that may encompass, and she'll extend her hospitality for the night. Once more you'll be enticed, yet you must firmly decline. On this particular occasion, the politeness of your refusal bears no consequence. Regardless of your verbal or nonverbal response, she will erupt in an absolute frenzy, hurling every conceivable profanity as her visage contorts with rage. It's the ultimate incongruity from an ostensibly amiable elderly lady, and yet this is the inevitable outcome. Upon her commencement of the venomous tirade, you should vacate your position and migrate toward the rear of the bus. Prudence dictates avoiding further interaction with her for the remainder of your voyage. The ensuing co-passenger you'll encounter is a disheveled, middle-aged man christened the Inebriate. He occupies a seat near the bus's tail, fitting the mold one would anticipate on a late-night commute. Nestling close to the Inebriate might not be judicious, mainly due to his pungent aroma, his exhalations reeking of spirits and tobacco. You'll observe how his dated garments bear stains and fissures, and his unkempt facial hair will be profoundly tangled. You might not harbor an inclination to converse, yet the inebriate will initiate a dialogue, defying your circumspection and luring you in. Remarkably, the inebriate will exhibit unexpected acumen and perspicacity, aspiring to enlighten you on topics encompassing theology, philosophy, and scientific postulations. He'll narrate an allegorical or fabled narrative, imbued with a somber twist. During our initial encounter, the inebriate recounted to me the parable of the amphibian and the arachnid, an anecdote that lays bare the malevolent and ruinous essence of existence. Subsequently, he'll retrieve a silver hip flask from the inner pocket of his jacket and proffer a libation. Irrespective of your proclivity for alcohol, succumbing to the urge to imbibe will prove tempting. The potion will emit an inviting saccharine aroma, though you must, of course, demur. Upon your refusal of the drink, the inebriate will shoot you a baleful glance before waggling his head and remarking, "You're a complete simpleton, a naive little child. You remain oblivious to the forces at play." This marks your signal to progress. Observe how the initial trio of travelers endeavor to captivate your attention, employing whichever allure or mystical abilities are at their disposal. Their ultimate objective resides in deceiving you into forsaking the bus. It goes without saying that you must refrain from complying, particularly if your intention is to reach your abode. The fate of those ensnared by any of their snares remains shrouded in mystery. What we are cognizant of is that numerous members of our assembly have evaporated inconspicuously throughout the passing years, and my metropolis boasts an extensive chronicle of bewildering vanishments. The fourth commuter, however, stands apart from the rest. He embodies a youthful male figure who occupies the rear row, all the while engrossed in melodies streaming from earpieces affixed to an 80s-style Walkman device. We dub him Bearer of Headphones, and his sole occupation seems to be the absorption of harmonies, eyelids shut as he synchronizes his foot's rhythm with the musical cadence. Bearer of Headphones shall not endeavor to establish interaction with you, nor even grant notice to your presence. Nonetheless, this does not imply his innocuousness. One of our assembly once collided with this individual. To be fair, it wasn't an unprovoked incident. Fueled by audacity, my confidant advanced right up to the passenger, gesticulating fervently and snapping his fingers in a bid to capture the specter's attention. When these endeavors proved fruitless, he recklessly seized the individual's earpieces, forcibly detaching them from his cranium. As expected, bearer of headphones responded unfavorably to this intrusion. In a heartbeat, he leaped from his seat, launching a swift blow with his clenched fist that toppled his antagonist with a solitary impact. My companion recollects a sharp, intense pang at the rear of his skull before surrendering to unconsciousness. His subsequent memory entails awakening within his own sleeping quarters on the ensuing morning, nursing a fractured nasal bone and a grievous laceration to the cranial rear. Furthermore, a note was discovered within the confines of his denim trousers, crudely inscribed on the flip side of an antiquated bus ticket, using what appeared to be desiccated blood. The message conveyed, "Repeat that action, and I shall forcibly detach your accursed cranium." Unsurprisingly, my associate refrained from embarking on the night bus anew. As for the intentions of bearer of headphones, they elude my comprehension. Nonetheless, I proffer the counsel to grant him considerable berth. At this juncture, you are likely pondering the rationale behind one's desire to seize the night bus, considering the inevitable transportation to a nightmarish parallel existence, and the prospect of encountering ethereal entities aspiring to imprison you therein. The succinct answer resides in the fact that no rational being would entertain such an endeavor, barring a scant cohort of intrepid urban explorers and dilettante investigators of the occult, myself among them. The majority who have embarked upon the spectral carriage have done so unintentionally, remaining oblivious to the nature of their entanglement until it was irrevocably tardy. Moreover, those who engage the bus once seldom entertain a repetition of the venture. However, those of us who embark upon multiple occasions, a second, a third, or, in my case, a fourth, bear distinct motives. In truth, one incentive surpasses all others: the aspiration to encounter the harbinger and present to him our solitary sanctioned inquiry. I shall forever lament my inaugural journey upon the bus throughout the entirety of my existence. Although I was inebriated, I possessed ample acumen to thwart the myriad of stratagems employed by the phantoms. However, I was ill-prepared for his arrival. The harbinger stands as the sole passenger who boards subsequent to the initial embarkation onto the bus. His appearance transpires later, after navigating through the spectral beings, when the notion of the worst has presumably waned. Prominently visible initially is the aflame crucifix perched atop the obscurated hillside, surveying the thoroughfare from the leftward vantage. My recollection of my initial encounter with this portentous emblem remains vivid, and the profound trepidation that enveloped me indicated an impending malevolence. Shortly after spotting the crucifix, my astonishment surged as the bus decelerated, easing onto the roadside and alighting within a designated area. The driver subsequently activated the articulated door at the forefront of the bus, unveiling the enigma residing on the opposing side. The terror that engulfed me was near subsuming, the contemplation of the horrors concealed within the umbral realm, of the entities and demons concealed amidst the spectral woods and undulating terrains. I cast a glance towards my co-passengers, vainly hoping these guileful apparitions would extend some refuge against the impending menace. Yet their heads remained bowed, ensconced in a solemn hush. Confronting the realization of my isolation, I shifted my gaze to the window, greeted by a panorama that sent shivers through my very core. Adjacent to the road, a diminutive shelter lay shrouded by rampant vegetation, barely discernible in the dim illumination. Within this seemingly forsaken refuge stood an imposing cloaked figure, a sinister being, visage obscured, immense frame ensconced within a lengthy somber robe. The enigmatic figure persisted in immobility and silence, yet I discerned the presence of a creature beside him, a voluminous black canine, its snout laden with serrated fangs that menaced through a malevolent snarl. It locked its predatory, ravenous gaze upon me, a slender pane of glass the only barrier. Visions cascaded through my mind, the beast emancipating itself, ascending the steps, hurtling down the aisle, sinking its incisors into my vulnerable flesh. Fortuitously, the hound's master retained authority over his creature, though peril remained omnipresent. Simultaneously, an oppressive, sweltering ambience enveloped, an almost unbearable wave of heat crashing upon me. Meanwhile, the bus rested in a stationary stance, the door ajar, the driver poised, awaiting the decision of the embarking passenger. Subsequent revelations have unveiled that the hooded specter christened the Harbinger elects between two courses at this juncture. He may remain immobile until the driver eventually utters something akin to, "Perhaps not this eve," whereupon the door concludes its parting and the bus resumes its course. Based on my own experiences and those of my contemporaries, this tends to be the predominant outcome. More often than not, the Harbinger refrains from departing the confines of the bus shelter, culminating the sequence. Yet, intermittently, he strides forth, traversing the mire with deliberate steps, his weighty boots dragging through the muck as he coerces his infernal canine companion, tethered by a leash, to accompany. Thereupon he boards the bus, eliciting a courteous salutation from the driver. "Greetings, sir. May your journey be pleasant." The foreteller shall remain unresponsive, gliding down the central passage accompanied by his loyal canine trailing in his wake. He shall settle into a seat near the forefront of the vehicle, lowering his cloak to unveil the concealed enigma beneath. Even now, I struggle to fully articulate the spectacle that unfolded in that chilling juncture. It appeared as if naught but an abyssal void occupied the space his countenance should inhabit, wherein two fervent orbs replaced his ocular faculties. No discernible mouth adorned his visage, casting doubt upon his capacity for speech. Yet speak he did, summoning me with a resounding, deity-like timbre that reverberated through the hollow expanse of the bus's interior. "Approach me, mortal progeny," he commanded. "Sit by my side that we might converse." As one might surmise, terror enveloped me in that instance, to the extent that I felt on the cusp of losing consciousness. Nevertheless, inexplicably, I acquiesced to the foreteller's behest, as though a force beyond my volition compelled me, as though dominion over my limbs had been wrested from my grasp. As I traversed the aisle, my gaze alighted upon the other passengers, yearning for succor in my plight. Yet all four retained their heads bowed, engaged in a synchronous chant, reciting an incantation in a tongue alien to my comprehension. It became unequivocal that the foreteller wielded dominion over these forsaken spirits, ensnaring them within his enchantment. Perchance they were once akin to us, ensnared by the spectral bus and the foreteller's divine capabilities. Irrespective, they extended no aid in that pivotal moment, leaving me to grasp the extent of my dependency upon the foreteller. Compelled beyond my own volition, I claimed a seat directly abaft the foreteller, his cranium twisted unnaturally to fixate upon me, his hound emitting a menacing growl directed at me, yet admirably refraining from sinking its fangs into my limb. Elucidating the foreteller's aroma proves a challenge, other than to state that the scent of demise clung to him. His fiery ocular orbs, surrogates for eyes, bore into me, a gaze from which escape proved futile despite my concerted efforts. I seemed aflame, my essence smoldering beneath his malevolent scrutiny. Ensnared within my terror-stricken state, I speculated upon the potential horrors this monstrosity might inflict. Perchance, extinguishing me lay within his purview, though this constituted the least of my concerns. Instead, I contended with the notion of mirroring the fate of those others, an anonymous and forsaken soul, fated to traverse this accursed bus eternally. In any event, I stood bereft of agency, shackled to my seat, awaiting the foreteller's utterance. Despite the absence of ocular organs, an uncanny sense indicated his gaze directed downward upon me, suffused with a disdainful contempt, as if I were an odious blemish upon his existence. Whether his proclamation resounded aloud or merely resided within my thoughts remains a quandary to this day. Regardless, his discourse held me rapt as he enunciated his words. "Behold, yet another feeble mortal has meandered into my dominion," he commenced, an inference undoubtedly aimed at my being. "I shall concede that my regard for your feeble and debilitated species is scant at best. Nonetheless, I am compelled to acknowledge the audacity of the sporadic individual such as yourself. Few possess the temerity to journey to this Stygian realm. Ergo, I shall afford you safe passage, responding to a solitary query. Interrogate me as you deem fit, mere mortal, and I shall bestow upon you my boundless wisdom." At this instant, a scenario I've relived repeatedly within my thoughts throughout the passing years unfolds once more before me. I could have, without a doubt, posed any query imaginable to the enunciator, be it the triumphant digits of a forthcoming lottery draw, the enigma surrounding JFK's demise, or the very purpose underlying existence itself. This being, all-seeing and all-knowing, exists beyond bounds, and the avenues are boundless. Within our online assembly, a particular individual directed a query towards the Annunciator, inquiring about the manner of his eventual demise. The rejoinder he received indicated that his own indulgences would usher his demise within half a year. Despite his being ensnared by addiction, he dismissed the Annunciator's cautionary words with laughter, persisting in his habits. Half a dozen months later, he met his end through a lethal overdose. And then there existed a youthful woman who, at the juncture of her encounter with the Annunciator, found herself ensnared within an oppressive and domineering partnership. Her query to the entity concerned the outcome should she persist in the company of her detestable companion. The Annunciator's response forecasted her life's cessation unless she severed her ties. This declaration served as the impetus propelling her towards emancipation. Approximately 12 months later, the vile individual met judicial consequence, being sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of another young woman. Yet naturally, I was ignorant of these incidents during that particular moment. All I experienced was an unadulterated wave of dread, immobilizing me as I remained seated, quaking in my footwear, as the Annunciator gazed down upon me, radiating a sense of repugnance. Amid that frigid juncture, only one inquiry managed to escape my quivering lips. "Pray tell, what form do you embody?" It seemed to me that the creature emitted a derisive scoff, brimming with disdain, prior to delivering its response. "Alas, my unfortunate offspring," it roared. "Regrettably, the depth of my essence and the embodiment of my symbolism shall eternally elude the comprehension of your kind." Nevertheless, an obligation to offer an explanation rested upon it, and therefore it began to elucidate, opting for the most rudimentary of expressions. "I embody the epochs past, present, and future. My vantage encompasses all, yet an oath restrains me from intervening within the realm inhabited by mortals." For a fleeting moment it paused, its intense blazing orbs pivoting to survey the somber expanse beyond the window's threshold. "This dominion that stretches before me is my sovereign realm, an enclave wherein sanctuary extends to those bereft of alternatives. It becomes a haven for wandering spirits ensnared betwixt the dimensions of mortality and eternity. Conceivably, you too shall find your way to this realm, securing an abode amidst my shadowy dominion, or perchance an alternative fate awaits. It was indeed within your rights to beseech revelations concerning your ultimate destiny, but such paths you chose to eschew. Yet I have dutifully unveiled your single permissible inquiry, and fulfilled my obligation. Now, my offspring, I must bid you adieu." With that pronouncement, it ascended from its seat, beckoning forth its canine companion, gliding with an air of purpose along the aisle, destined for the egress. My astonishment knew no bounds, plunging me into a state of profound shock. Numerous inquiries still clamored for expression within my mind, and my lips parted instinctively, sans forethought. "Stay a moment," I cried out, my immediate regret eclipsing my impulse to address it. The Annunciator swiveled abruptly, its orb-like eyes smoldering with even fiercer intensity, its hound emitting a low growl as its bared fangs strained against the restraint of its leash, as if striving to reach me. When the Annunciator's voice resounded anew, it resounded with anger and a palpable threat. "Take heed, you insufferable imbecile. I've thus far tolerated your presence within my dominion, but do not essay my patience. The torment I can inflict upon you far surpasses the fabric of your worst nightmares, and I shan't hesitate to unleash it should you flout my decrees once more." I sensed the complete evacuation of vitality from my countenance, and my entire frame quaked uncontrollably as an overwhelming dread conquered me. Understandably, I refrained from voicing any further expressions. Instead, I observed with astonishment mixed with shock, as the Herald gracefully descended the passageway, trailing his fierce infernal canine companion behind him. The chauffeur brought the bus to a gradual stop, affording the deity-like entity the opportunity to disembark. A feeling of alleviation started to emerge as I believed my ordeal was drawing to a close. Yet an ultimate twist was woven into this grotesque spectacle. As the Herald alighted from the carriage, my co-passengers abruptly arose in unison from their seats, all pivoting concurrently toward my direction. To my consternation, I observed their irises transform into a deep onyx hue, while their mouths stretched wide, revealing vast obsidian voids. It was as though they endeavored to unleash screams, yet no sound emanated. And then, within the enshrouded woods on either side of the thoroughfare, I beheld a multitude of blazing crimson orbs emerging from the tree line. These belonged to unholy creatures that emitted wolf-like howls in the obsidian expanse of night, all of them fixated upon our bus. In terror, I emitted a shriek, apprehending that the Herald had altered his intent, summoning his infernal underlings to rend me asunder. The clamor of howls surged, reaching an ear-splitting crescendo that nearly deafened me. What ensued next remains a hazy fragment within my recollection. I recall the ghastly tumult, the force escalating within my cranium to a point where I believed my skull might rupture. All at once, a searing burst of radiance enveloped my vision, compelling me to shield my eyes beneath my palms. A beat later, I dared to unveil my eyes, only to discern the vanishing of the creatures, along with my ghoul-like fellow voyagers. I remained solitary within the bus, solely accompanied by the driver as we continued along that desolate course. Recollections of the subsequent portion of that odyssey are exceedingly faint. It wasn't long before we abandoned the somber dominion, returning to the familiar city streets I recognized. Upon reaching my familiar street, I struggled to believe the reality, suspecting yet another illusion. I lingered in my seat for a considerable duration, until eventually the chauffeur's urging voice roused me, beseeching, "Your halt, my companion. Come forth now, please. I cannot tarry indefinitely." With a measure of trepidation, I traversed the aisle and disembarked, encountering the refreshing chill of the air upon my skin as I re-entered the realm of the living. I recollect the chauffeur bidding me good night, expressing that we would cross paths again prior to his departure. Thus, that concludes my account, though not entirely. You may inquire why I did not relinquish my fixation with the spectral bus following my harrowing encounter. Well, for an extended period, I did abstain. However, eventually, curiosity overcame my restraint. I am not fond of life's uncertainties, the obscurities that lie ahead. Once I accepted this as an immutable verity, yet now I possess a deeper understanding. The Herald lingers beyond, bearing the potential to furnish the answers I covet. I shall not squander my chance a second time. Over years, I have pursued the bus, capturing it on 2 subsequent occasions. On both instances, I embarked and sidestepped the snares set by the ghastly passengers. And on both occasions, I awaited the Herald's embarkation, yet he remained ensconced, refusing to abandon his sanctuary, thus leaving my aspirations thwarted. It has been incredibly disheartening, yet surrender is not within my disposition. This very night I shall embark on the quest for the bus once more, and I shall persist in this endeavor until the Herald heeds my summons. I am cognizant of the hazards. A single night might find me boarding the spectral carriage, never to return home. Nonetheless, this compulsion persists within me. I am compelled to uncover the verity regardless of the toll exacted. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am compelled to catch a ride upon that very bus.